Hello, it's Mrs. Barber and I'm back. Can you believe today is day 24? I'm recording this on Earth Day, even though it's the day after Earth Day when you will hear it. And I am going to read to you about somebody spectacular named Jane Goodall. We talked about her before, but it's worth reading about her again. I was so excited today. I went to the Seesaw website and I saw that you guys are making pictures and even doing some of the work that wasn't assigned yet. And my heart was so touched because not only were you making pictures and sharing stories, but you were commenting on each other's pictures and stories. You were encouraging each other to make more artwork while we're having our indoor adventure. I am so proud of you. And I listened to someone, I never say names on YouTube, but there was someone in our class and they were talking about this indoor adventure we're having and how we have all kinds of feelings about the indoor adventure. And this girl was being so encouraging. She was saying, make the best of it. And sometimes some things about it are very hard, not doing the things that we used to do, but to set your mind to have a positive attitude. And you know what? She was kind of my hero of the day today. Jane Goodall is a famous hero, but one of you, and if you're listening to this, you know who you are. And if you're listening to this and you didn't make up that very positive speech that's on Seesaw, you should go and take a listen. It has an arrow on it, so you listen to what someone in our class is saying for about a minute and a half. It was very inspirational. I was very touched, so very proud of you. Rose and I spent today after school was over decorating and painting our back porch, and I used a kind of paint that will not come off my hands, so you might see some blue, but when you do things with your hands sometimes you get a little messy. So on to the story, and at the end we will do science. I know science is your favorite and you've been asking for it, so I'm trying to find some more fun, easy at-home experiments like we did today in class. Little People, Big Dreams, Jane Goodall. And this gift is from Valerie Bertinelli. Remember that song we made up? Little People, Big Dreams, Jane Goodall. When Jane was a little girl, I'm just going to remind you who Jane Goodall is. She is a scientist that's a girl, and she is a super famous, strong woman scientist. So she was involved in conservation of a very particular animal. So I'll just read the story and let you hear the rest of it, but just wanted to give you that heads up. When Jane was a little girl, her father gave her a stuffed chimpanzee named Jubilee. She carried him wherever she went. Jane loved animals very much. She wanted to live in the jungle with wild chimpanzees, just like the heroes of her bedtime stories, Tarzan and Jane. At night, her mother read her their adventures. But Jane could not afford to go to college to study animals, so she would have to study them in her own way. She saved every penny she had until she could buy a boat ticket to Kenya in Africa. When she arrived, Jane met a well-known scientist named Louis Leakey. He was looking for a chimpanzee researcher willing to study them in the wild. He thought that they could learn about humans by studying apes. It was the opportunity Jane had been waiting for. So Jane took another journey to the shores of Gombe in Tanzania. To start with, she couldn't see any chimpanzees, but she had the feeling that they were near, watching her. She decided to sit quietly in the same spot day after day. Finally, a small group of chimpanzees appeared and let her sit with them. Jane had been accepted into the family. Instead of numbering them, as all other scientists did, Jane decided to give every chimpanzee a name. There was David Graybeard, Flo, Flint, Fifi, Gigi, to name a few. By watching them carefully, she noticed that some chimps were kind, quiet, and generous, while others were bullies. It seemed that humans and chimps were not so different after all. Then Jane made another incredible discovery. Chimpanzees could make their own tools. This was something only humans were thought to do. Jane's talent was quickly recognized by Cambridge University. Here she studied for her doctorate in animal behavior. It wasn't long before she wrote her first article for one of the most famous science magazines. Jane continued to study chimps in Gombe for 40 years, but jungles were starting to disappear across Africa, which put all animals in danger. She knew she had to do something. Jane joined countless projects to protect nature. She was no longer a courageous researcher, but also the most determined wildlife defender the world had ever seen. And the little girl who loved animals challenges us to be kind to nature. Because if chimpanzees can live in harmony with their environment, we can too. And this is a timeline of Jane's life, Jane Goodall. And this is the more serious part of the book. Jane Goodall was born in London, England. When she was 1, her father gave her a cuddly toy chimpanzee named Jubilee. Some people thought it would scare her, but she loved it, and it fostered her early love of animals. From an early age, Jane dreamed of living in Africa, where she could watch and write about animals. Jane's mother encouraged her dreams and told her she must never give up. But when Jane left school, she couldn't afford to go to college to follow her dream. This sounds like it's the same words as in the book, so I'm going to stop with those words because they are actually the words of the book repeated. Some things that struck me in this book, and you have a different mind, so different things strike you, is this toy that she had when she was a child was very influential on her, who she became. She loved this toy and she named it Jubilee, and I don't know if you made the connection, but when she named her chimpanzees later, they were names that were kind of like Jubilee, kind of a silly, fun name. David Graybeard, Flo, Flint, Fifi, and Gigi. So what happened to her as a little girl impacted her forever. There were 2 other things that I think made her who she became. And that is that she had people in her life who loved her, encouraged her, and read to her. So right now, while you're on your at-home adventure, encouraging each other and reading might make the biggest difference in your life in the future. It might shape exactly who you're going to be. You might pick up an encyclopedia and you will learn about something new, or go to encyclopedia.com or Wikipedia and you say, oh my goodness, I am so excited about this one kind of caterpillar. I want to learn everything about it, and it might shape who you become. Or learn about Thomas Edison, and you might want to become an inventor. Another thing that struck me in this book is it seems like, she's sitting around here, and then all of a sudden, these chimpanzees are her family. And that is not what happened. She spent a long time, guys, every day. Scientists do not go and think, I'm going to look at something fast, like we did in science today. We're going to look at a leaf, we're going to rip it apart, talk about veins, boom, done, over. She spent months and months. It was hot. Things stung her. It was not comfortable. And she sat very still so that they could trust her. When they came toward her, she sat still, even though all day, every day, she was waiting for them to come toward her. Jane was a very patient person. And she sat there by herself. So she was also comfortable being alone, reading and writing and taking notes. I love this book. This series of books. We read about Frida Kahlo in class with that series of books. I brought them home so we could read all of them. Next is a very short poem. Oh, my poem. And in one of our favorite books, Where the Sidewalk Ends, it's a very, very teeny poem that I just thought was very silly. Standing on my elbow with my finger in my ear, biting on a dandelion and humming kind of queer. While I watched a yellow caterpillar creeping on my wrist, I leaned on a tree, and I said to me, why am I doing this? I like the end. It's called a punchline. Standing on my elbow with my finger in my ear, biting on a dandelion and humming kind of queer. While I watched the yellow caterpillar creeping up my wrist, I leaned on a tree, and I said to me, why am I doing this? You ever do that? You're doing something so goofy, dancing around, doing something weird, even throwing a tantrum, and then you tell yourself, why am I doing this? I ordered on Amazon.com this stuff called food coloring. Food coloring. If you don't have it at home and you have liquid watercolor or even an old marker, Believe it or not, a marker that you think is dried out, if your parents break it apart and you take out the filament in the middle, that's the tube, it has ink in it. And you can use that as a kind of coloring. So I'm using food coloring because I know it's quite strong. And maybe you have it at home, maybe you don't. Maybe you have liquid watercolor, maybe you don't. Maybe you can think of another creative thing you can use, like if you cook cabbage or beets and the water is dark and red, ask your parents if you can save a little bit of it when it cools down. You can use it as a dye. So this project needs dye, and this project needs celery. I saw online that someone did it with romaine lettuce, which is kind of a crunchy lettuce, but my lettuce is not good for this today. So I'm picking celery, and I'm going to use 2 stalks. These were wobbly and not the greatest. I usually use them in cooking, but they're good for science. Celery. So they're each going in a cup, and it's about the same amount of water, similar. All my cups don't match. I'm going to do green in one, and I think purple in another. I think those will be good. No, green is not so good. That's already green. How about something more exciting, Mrs. Barber? How about red and blue? Dun, 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 dun. Red and blue. And you can use any color you want to. And then I'm going to put the celery in and be like Jane Goodall and just be patient. I'm going to put the celery in, and then tomorrow when we have our class meeting, we will see if something happened. As what scientists do. I think I would like more saturation in my color, which means a deeper color in the blue. We'll see if something happens tomorrow. So that's all. I just set up the experiment. Think, what will happen? Form a hypothesis. I think the celery will what? And tomorrow we will do it. And if you watch this video and you have your own celery or lettuce or maybe an onion that your parents say it's fine to use for an experiment, we don't need to eat that, you can try it, or you can try it with some leaves outside. So let's see what happens tomorrow. I love you. I'm proud of you. Go watch that seesaw video. It's very inspirational.